Thank you for coming. Thanks for having me in Brazil. And you're going to be amazed at what you're going to see today. You're going to be very, very happy to see the science and the truth at last. So let's jump in. We're told that we should replace plastics with these other materials. We're told that we're drowning in plastics. We're told that it's filling our landfills, and it's all of the waste that we create. And that people are dropping it in the ocean. We're told that the turtles and the whales are being harmed by these plastics. We're told that we eat a credit card of plastic every week. The World Wildlife Fund tells us that. But are these true? Who's checking these facts? It's very easy to say things online now, but who is checking it? And the answer is me, I'm checking it. So let's look and see what science says about these things. And then, when we understand that science says the opposite to what we're being told, let's follow the money, because following the money is the way to understand how things work. So who am I? My name's Chris, and I'm the crazy scientist who read 4,000 studies unpaid because my daughters were lied to at school. And that made me angry, because if we teach our children lies, they will grow up to believe things which are nonsense, and they'll be voting for politicians for things that make no sense, and the whole world becomes a bad place if we teach our children lies at school. So I read 4,000 studies unpaid, and then I've shared these findings for free in the book, in Portuguese, in English, in German, all for free. And I'm independent as well. So let's look and see what makes something green. And the answer is the only way to know what is green is a life cycle analysis. And this adds up all the impact, not of the material, but of the whole life cycle of the car, or the hairdryer, or the packaging. And it includes carbon dioxide, fossil fuel use, effect on water, and so on. This is the only scientific way to know what causes more impact and what causes less impact. Because everything creates some impact, and if we want to be responsible, we have to pick the alternative that creates the least impact. And life cycle analysis is the way to do that. So what does it tell us? Here's one example. They looked at many, many life cycle analyses. They looked at 14 different types of packaging, and they found out that in 13 out of 14 cases, plastic was the least impactful material choice. Better than the alternatives in 13 out of 14. There's a new version of this study, and in 15 out of 16 cases, plastic caused the least harm, not just in greenhouse gas, but in all of these factors. That's more than 90% of the time plastic causes least harm. And nobody in the public knows that, and none of the politicians know it, and our children don't know it either. Here's another study. It looked at a huge number of life cycle studies, and it found out if you replace plastics, you create 4 times more waste. You create 3 times more greenhouse gas, and you use twice as much fossil fuel. And that's what people are doing now. People are moving away from plastics and choosing to dramatically increase waste, increase greenhouse gas, and increase fossil fuel usage. And that is just stupid. And we have to stop it. Here is an example of a container, and we see that there are many different alternatives. The top one has low impact, but it's actually impossible to recycle because it's paper and metal and 2 different types of polymer, all stuck together. So although this thing looks like paper, it's not really paper. What turns out to be the most recyclable and lowest impact solution is plastic, polyethylene and PET. Much lower impact than glass or metal. And there are 5 studies like this, and they all agree. This is not a specially chosen study. Every study in the world agrees on this. Plastic is best for drink containers. Somebody in the audience asked for an example of PVC. Everyone is against PVC for no logical reason. I looked at life cycle studies on drinking water pipes, and here's an example. So we're comparing a metal pipe, which has a very high impact, to polyethylene and PVC plastics, which have very, very low impact. And as we'll see on another slide, this is not the only study on pipes. There are many studies on pipes, and plastic always causes much less impact than metal, and it's much cheaper as well, and safer. So here's a summary of the life cycle studies that I have looked at. I've looked at 30 studies on plastic bags, comparing it to cotton, comparing it to paper. There are 30 studies in the world. Every study in the world says that the plastic bag causes less harm than paper or cotton. So why are we banning and taxing the greenest solution? That's completely crazy. Who would ban or tax the best option that we have? But that's what we're doing right now. And when they do studies, when you ban a plastic bag, they check to see what happens. And the answer is, when you ban plastic bags, you end up selling way more plastic. Because now, people used to use these very thin bags from their groceries, and they use it in a trash bag. But when you ban the grocery bag, people go and buy much, much thicker plastic bags for the trash bag, and you end up selling more plastic and doing much, much more harm than if you didn't have the ban. So then they have to reverse the ban. The politician looks like a fool, and we increase harm. Also, if we look at fabrics, people are always claiming that the natural material must cause less harm, and that's not true. PET, polyester, has less harm than cotton, but wool has less harm than PET. So people are always asking me, is there a material that is better than plastic? And the answer is yes, wool and wood. Those are the two materials that are greener usually than plastic, but you can't sew a computer, right? You can't knit a cell phone. So that's the problem. If you can pick wool or wood, it's usually the greenest choice. But in every other case, plastic wins. This is one argument that people always use against plastic. They say that it's using oil, and it's not really true. This is what happens to a barrel of oil. 85% is burned, and we have no problem with that. We get in our car and we burn the oil. We jump in a truck, we burn the oil. In an airplane, burning the oil. No problem. Heating, burning oil. Everyone's happy to burn the oil. And suddenly, you use a very small amount of oil to make plastic, and people are like, oh, no, this is terrible. How can we do such a thing? These people are happy to burn 85% of the oil, and suddenly they have a problem making something useful with 5% of the oil. And then, if you want to, 10 years later, you can still burn the plastic and get the energy out, like you would have done if you burned it right away. So plastic uses just 5% of the oil. That much. And even more important than that, plastic overall reduces the amount of oil we use because it makes our cars lighter, it prevents food waste, and it reduces oil needed for heating because it's insulating our buildings. So plastic is only using a little bit of oil, but it's saving more oil than is used to make the plastic, and nobody knows that. There's a guy in America who spent $75 million, Michael Bloomberg, to fight against plastic because he thinks plastic is using oil. He wasted $75 million of his own money because plastic is reducing the amount of oil we use. I wish I was so rich that I could throw away $75 million to fight against myself. This is the amount of oil needed to make all of these different materials. And we see plastic is on the right. You use much less fossil fuel to make plastic than glass or steel or aluminium or paper. Plastic uses less oil. So it's true that a small amount of the oil ends up in the plastic, but the total oil needed to make this material is much less with plastic. And this post went viral on LinkedIn. It got 280,000 views because nobody had seen this information before, that although plastic contains oil, you need much less oil in total to make plastic compared to almost any other material. Here's something else that the public don't know. This is the total impact of food. Only 3% is the packaging, and the 97% is the food and the transportation. And so what happens is you create a little bit of greenhouse gas to make the plastic packaging, but you end up saving more greenhouse gas than was needed to make the packaging. Why? Because now the food lasts longer, it's not wasted, and it's not damaged in transportation. So plastic packaging saves more carbon dioxide than is created to make the plastic, and no one is talking about this. This is not just a theory, this is proven. Here are the numbers. Plastic packaging on average for food saves 5 to 9 times more CO2 than was created to make the packaging in the first place. What about recycling? We heard about recycling just now. Is it green? People ask me all the time, is recycling green? And the answer is yes. So we start here with the greenest material, which is plastic, and when we recycle it, we make it 70 or 80% greener than it already was. And it's important to know that plastics are the greenest option, even with zero recycling. I'll show you that in the next slide. So this is the impact of the alternative materials. The impact of plastic with zero recycling is still far less than the other materials. So we're not waiting for plastic recycling to make plastic green. Plastic already is the greenest solution, and the public don't know this. The public think we need recycling to make plastic green. And recycling is good, it makes it greener, but it's already the greenest option, even with zero recycling. No politicians know that. People sometimes ask me, why isn't there more recycling? And the answer is actually simple, it's down to money. If you look at things which are terrible for the environment, like gold, you create 27,000 kilograms of CO2 to make 1 kilogram of gold. What else do we know about gold? It's very expensive, we never throw it away, and we always recycle it. Because it's so expensive. Why is it so expensive? For the same reasons that it's terrible for the environment. It needs a lot of energy to make it. You create a lot of pollution, a lot of transportation. On the other end of this spectrum, we see materials which are very cheap, very cheap to buy, and very low impact, like plastic. And these materials are so cheap for the same reasons that they're so green, and that means that people drop them on the floor because they have a low value, and it's not as easy to make money recycling them. It's not that there's a conspiracy. In America, they say there's a conspiracy against plastic recycling. We don't want to do it. It's not a conspiracy. It's just harder to make money recycling plastic than it is recycling gold. And people are telling us now we should abandon plastic and make things instead from aluminium because it's collected more and recycled more. Of course it is, but that's a stupid idea. That's taking something which is green and cheap and replacing it with something which is more expensive and much worse for the environment. Of course you recycle aluminium more for the same reasons you recycle gold more. It's more expensive. So are we drowning in plastic waste? Is that true? This is our use of materials as a pie chart, and I was amazed to see this. Plastic is under 1% by volume or by weight of materials we use today. Who knows that? I didn't know it. The politicians don't know it. Our children don't know it. We are talking all day long. We're having congresses, we're making plans, we're forming consortium, we're fighting to show how good plastics are, and everyone's talking about plastic and completely ignoring the other 99% of materials which are causing much, much more harm than plastic. And that's why my talk is called The Plastic Distraction. Everyone's so distracting talking about plastic that they're not actually looking at the things that would make a difference. People often say, the green groups, they love to say plastic is bad because it's increasing rapidly. So here is the use of all of our materials. What do we see? Can you even see the tiny, tiny yellow bar? That yellow bar, 10% of that is plastic. So all the materials we use, metal, glass, paper, concrete, they're all increasing at 3 or 4% a year, the exact same as plastic. It is completely a lie to say plastic is bad because it's increasing, because all the materials are increasing at the same speed. What about waste? They looked at waste, and this is waste over time, and they found out that waste used to go up every year, and suddenly it stopped. It stopped going up as fast, it went flat. And scientists said, why did it go flat? And the answer is plastic. 1 kilogram of plastic replaces 3 or 4 kilograms of metal, glass, or paper on average. And that is why our waste generation is dramatically less than it was before, because plastic has replaced these other materials and reduced total waste. And nobody knows this. I have spoken to US senators, politicians, none of them know this. They think that plastic is filling our landfills, and it's the opposite. Plastic is reducing the waste going to landfills, and that's scientifically proven. You can see every slide of mine has a study, and on the website you can go and click the button and read the study. So most people get up and they talk and they give you opinions, but everything I say, I'm a scientist, so I have to prove everything I'm saying. This is waste generation in different countries, and you would think that, and you can see the countries with more money, they generate more waste because they have more stuff. And you would think this would be a problem, but it actually is not a problem. It doesn't matter how much waste you generate almost, or where it's generated. What matters is how you manage your waste. And here we see that the countries that are making all the waste are managing it properly. They're putting it in landfills, they're disposing of it properly, and it's not getting in the oceans. What we see is that poor countries who haven't caught up yet, they're the ones putting all this stuff in their rivers and in the oceans. But the green groups, like the World Wildlife Fund and Greenpeace, they want us to feel bad about a problem which is not our problem. We are not mismanaging our waste. Our waste is not going in the oceans. Why do the green groups want us to feel bad? Because we have money. You can't go to a guy in Africa and say, hey, you're putting all your stuff in the ocean, give me your money, because he doesn't have any money. That's why the green groups want us to feel guilty about a problem which is not ours. So how much of this stuff is going in the ocean? Is it really a problem? What does science say? This is a picture of a beach where tourists go. This is in Brazil. And you can see it's a mess. And studies have shown people go to the beach because it's beautiful, and they drop a lot of stuff, and eventually it's so ugly, they go to another beautiful beach and put all the junk there. This is a beach that people don't go to. It's clean. Almost nothing there. These are the beaches you don't see because people can't reach these beaches. They're inaccessible. They're remote beaches. So scientists have studied this. Beaches with people on them have a lot of litter, and the litter comes from the people, not from the ocean. So here's one study, and this is a study in Brazil, and they could tell that the litter was coming from the people because you have these queso sticks. They're little sticks of wood with a cheese on it. This is a specific kind of litter that only Brazil creates. And that's how they could tell, that's one of the ways they could tell this litter was coming from the people on the beach. It's obvious. It's not generated from somewhere else. People are dropping litter and then blaming the litter or blaming the plastic company. They've done studies on littering, and 81% of litter is dropped on purpose. And then these people turn around and blame the litter, or they blame Nestle, or they blame Coca-Cola. And this is wrong. Litter is caused by people. That is scientifically proven. It is wrong to blame materials, it's wrong to blame companies. And we know the solutions to litter are education, deposits, and fines. Because as soon as the litter has a value, people don't drop it anymore. People only drop it when it's cheap. Here's an example. They print 8 billion plastic banknotes every year. You have them in Brazil. They have them in Australia. They have them in Canada, they have them in Mexico, many countries, England, plastic banknotes. How many of these do you see on the beach when you go on holiday? I would love to see that. I would love to go on holiday with my wife, and I'm sitting there and the water's just bringing me money. It would be wonderful. A small, easily lost piece of polypropylene. Why aren't they on the beach? Why aren't they in the rivers? Why aren't they on the floor everywhere? Because it has a value. They print one of these every year for every person in the world, 8 billion, and I've never seen one on the ground because it has a value. And that's why deposits work. They've also done studies on degradables. The idea behind degradables is the public want to be able to drop their litter and have it vanish by magic, like Harry Potter, right? But that doesn't work. They've done studies on degradables, and what happens is people drop them more. If you go for degradables, you end up with twice as much litter as you get if you just have a PET bottle. So it's a bad idea to go for degradables. They cost more, they're usually not as green, and you double the amount of litter instead of solving the problem. What about plastic? Is it harming the animals? Is it harming the turtles? We'll look at that too. So they looked at this pollution. We mentioned pollution a minute ago. It's actually the wrong word. Scientists found that it's not pollution. What you're looking at is litter. If I drop something here and it goes in a river and it shows up somewhere else, they call it pollution. But it was actually litter that moved. And this is important because we need to stop calling it pollution. We need to call it litter because solutions to litter, we know the solutions. It's education, deposits, and fines. Blaming Coca-Cola or plastic does not solve the problem because it's a people problem, not a material problem. What about this enormous amount of plastic that goes into the ocean? And this is an incredible number. So a lady called Jenna Jambeck sat down on a couch and she imagined how much plastic is going in the ocean with zero data. She just made up a number out of nothing. She said, I wonder if I took 2% of all the plastic within 50 kilometers of the coast, anywhere in the world, and I threw that plastic in the ocean, how much would it be? And the answer is 10 million tons. And that's the number that Greenpeace tell us, Ellen MacArthur tell us, World Wildlife Fund tell us. All of these NGOs are telling us that 10 million tons of plastic are going in the ocean. And it's a lie. It's a complete lie, and the number was fabricated with no data to support it. And we have 50 years of data with literally ships pulling nets and measuring how much plastic is there. The best estimate for the amount of plastic going from rivers into the ocean is not 10 million tons, it's 6,000 tons. It's still too much, but it's not 10 million. The 10 million is a lie. There are studies and studies and studies showing that it's wrong. The other thing that they do is they say that the amount of plastic going into the ocean is going up rapidly, but it isn't. We have 50 years of data showing that it's constant, completely constant. So the amount is 1,000 times lower than we're told and not increasing. And they tell us there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean. That has been disproven by the BBC, by the CBC, and by me. It's complete fiction. So they've done studies on what you find when you actually go to the ocean, what is in there and what's causing the problem. And the answer is fishing nets. So if you take take a net and you pull things out of the gyre that they talk about, and they measure it, what did they find? They found 0 bags, so 0, 1 straw, and 9 bottles. So they found this much consumer plastic, and they found 3 tons of fishing nets. Enough to fill the whole stage. And what is Inc. talking about? Inc. 5, UNEP, this treaty, completely ignoring the fishing nets. They're making regulations, they're having meetings, they're flying thousands of people to talk about a problem that does not exist. Consumer plastic in the ocean is not a problem. It is not harming whales, it is not harming turtles, it is not harming birds. There is no science to support that. What is harming turtles and whales is fishing nets. And the Inc. is going to ignore the 3 tons of material and focus on two plastic bottles. And even worse than that, when I wanted to show the science to the politicians in Inc., they wouldn't allow me to do it. Why? Because they're making millions of dollars from these lies. And they don't want any scientists to show the truth because it would destroy their business. So the ratio of fishing nets to consumer things that we're talking about, plastic bottles and bags, is 2,800 to 1 by weight. And UNEP is talking, Inc. is talking about the 1 and ignoring the 2,800. That is insane. This is what harms whales. There are studies on what harms whales, and the answer is nets. There are also not a mention of plastic, not any mention of plastic. It's fishing nets. The same with turtles. That's what's harming turtles and whales, nothing to do with plastics. 4 different studies on that. What about microplastics in the ocean? Scientists looked at that too, and they said that the amount of microplastic in the ocean is far, far too low to be any problem. They said it's insignificant, negligible. So are we eating, everyone loves to talk about microplastics for some reason. So are we eating a credit card of microplastics every week? First, let's talk about degradation. They say plastics are bad because they don't degrade, and that's a lie. I have the guy from Braskem here, right? We know that we spend $5 billion a year to stabilize plastics because they're so unstable. If you cannot buy polypropylene with no stabilizer. It doesn't exist anywhere in the world. It goes bad like an apple. You can put a piece of polypropylene in your desk drawer and it will have lost all of its strength in less than 1 year. Plastics have stabilizers in them, and this is a good thing because we need to add just enough stabilizer for the use. So a plastic bag has a very low amount of stabilizer and it degrades rapidly outdoors. Whereas if we make a plastic pipe, it lasts 100 years because we put better stabilizers and more stabilizer in it. So it's a lie to say that plastics don't degrade. Plastics degrade very rapidly, just like paper does. And here are two studies on bags. So they measured how long does it take for a plastic bag to degrade outside if you leave it on the ground. The answer is 9 months. It's vanished, completely disintegrated in less than 9 months. And that's a real measurement. And these green groups tell us it takes 450 years with no data to support it. This is the size of lie that they will tell us to get our money. Plastics are facing discrimination. Why? If you find a 500-year-old ship in the ocean, you say, hooray, let's make a museum. We can sell tickets. We can take our children to go and see this old piece of wood. If we find old coins, we're like, hooray, let's put it in a museum. Wonderful. If we see a plastic bag that's been there for a year, they're like, oh, this is unacceptable. It hasn't degraded. So we're not being fair to plastics. We're saying that plastics are bad because they don't degrade, even though they do degrade much faster than metal or concrete or most of the other materials we use. The World Wildlife Fund said that we eat a credit card of plastic a week. And of course, that study was funded by them. So other independent scientists went and checked that study and said it was complete nonsense. Do you know how long it takes to eat a credit card of plastic? 5 grams? 20,000 years. That's how long it actually takes to breathe in and eat a credit card worth of plastic. It's completely negligible. It's 0.001% of dust. But that's not what we hear online. And when we talk about microplastics, it's just a part of dust. We should ask ourselves, is plastic toxic? Canada tried to say that plastics are toxic. There's a crazy politician there called Stephen Guilbeault who just makes up crazy ideas with no evidence. And this is one thing. Plastic is absolutely non-toxic. We have 50 years of data. You could eat a cup of polyethylene every day and nothing happens to you. You could eat a cup of polyethylene or polypropylene or PVC or PET every day, a whole cup, every day for a month. Nothing happens to you. It's non-toxic, just like sugar. It's less toxic than ethanol, which I'm very happy to drink. And then people will say, okay, the plastic is non-toxic, what about the additives? So I also looked at the toxicity of the additives, calcium carbonate, talc, minerals, and also the stabilizers, all completely non-toxic. What happens when the fish eat a piece of plastic? And the answer is nothing. It goes straight through the fish, nothing happens. This has been studied for polyethylene, for nylon, for polypropylene, no harm at all. Just goes straight through like a stone would do. How toxic are microplastics? We have 50 years of testing on this too. There are some studies that show a problem, and those studies are bad science. They're disproven studies. Why are they so bad? They use 1 million times too much plastic, 1 million times more than is in the environment. Complete rubbish. This science is so bad, these people should be sent home in shame and be forced to pay back the money. That's how bad the science is. 1 million times too much plastic, and they use the wrong kind of plastic. They use a special kind from the lab that doesn't even exist in the environment. So what happens when we look at real studies? How toxic is microplastic? And the answer is, it's not toxic. It's just as safe as clay or cellulose, which is what plants are made of. And this is not just one study. We have many studies for decades about this. We all heard about microplastic in the blood. And I thought that's a funny thing, because if microplastic is a small part of dust, where are all the other particles that should be in the blood? And this is another thing that they do to cheat. When we see these studies, they throw away all the other particles and they only tell us about the microplastic particle. And that's cheating. That's bad science. So this study, they looked at particles in human blood, in blood clots, and we can see one piece of polyethylene and 99 other particles, all kinds of pigments and strange chemicals of other things. This is the only study where they tell you, okay, plastic is there, but it's a very, very small percentage and it's also non-toxic. So we need to start doing better science about this and not misleading. This is the point I made before, that only 10% of studies are actually valid and done on the right kind of plastics at the right concentrations. So 85 to 92% of microplastic studies are non-valid, according to scientists. Another problem we have is not just the scientists doing bad science, but we have the media lying to us as well. So scientists compared what do scientists say to what does the media say. 24% of scientific studies say that microplastics might be harmful. 92% of media articles say that microplastics are harmful. So the media have completely lied about this. Why? Because it's easy to sell newspapers when you're scaring people. So we need to stop this as well. And as most of the people in this room know, you're business people, we're living in the real world, and we know that things happen because of money. And that's the problem. At the moment, people are lying to us to get our money, and that's a very easy way to get money. You scare people into giving you their money. Let's compare what these NGOs are telling us to what science says. They tell us plastic is the #1 material problem. It's less than 1%. They tell us microplastics are a problem. Not a problem. They tell us ocean plastics are huge and increasing. No, they're very low and not increasing. Every single thing these groups tell us is wrong. And do you know why? Because they make money by lying to us. The president of Greenpeace left Greenpeace and wrote 2 books saying their business model is to lie for money. And that's why he left. Because they don't care about the environment anymore, according to him. And the other groups, many of them, are doing the same thing. That's why we're facing a problem. Here's another media article. They say, we found microplastics on Everest. That's like saying, I found dust on Everest. Imagine I found a piece of dust here. Oh, look, a piece of dust. I need to call the newspaper immediately. This would not get in the news, right? Finding dust is not news, but every time it's plastic, suddenly it's like, oh my goodness, we found dust. Let's put it in the newspaper. That's just silly. Here is a BBC article on the left, and you can see this image is photoshopped because there has never been in the world a turtle with a plastic bag around its neck. It's impossible. It's never happened. This image was photoshopped, and I said to BBC, please remove this image because it's a lie. And they did. They said, sorry, the image was misleading, it was photoshopped, and they replaced it with the image on the right. And I've done this in some other cases, but in about 95% of cases, the media do not care about the truth. They stick with the lies because they don't want to admit that they were wrong. So scientists have studied this and said, we are focused far too much on plastic, we're confusing the public, and we're failing to really help the environment because we're ignoring most of the problem. It's not me saying that, it's not me alone, it's other scientists too. Here's another study that says the same thing. We need to stop talking about plastic all the time and start looking at the things that are really causing damage, and it's not plastic. This is what happens when you lie to people about plastic. They start going for alternatives, and they do crazy things like this. They take a plastic bottle and they hide it inside a paper bottle, because that's what the customer wants. The customer wants a paper bottle. You can't make a vodka bottle out of paper, so they hide a plastic bottle inside. It's really silly. It's not good for the environment. They also studied supermarket executives. You've worked with some of these people, I think, Ron. These people know that replacing plastic increases harm, increases waste, increases fossil fuel. They know that, but they do it because their customer wants it. Why does their customer want it? Because they've been told a load of lies. And that's why we need to take this fight you talked about. We need to start making sure that people have accurate information so that they can start helping the environment and doing things that actually make sense. Why do people talk about bags all day? On the left is a study when they ask people, what can we do to help the environment? And everyone thinks that we should be using less plastic bags. And on the right, it shows using less plastic bag has no effect. In fact, it makes things worse, right? But people want to talk about plastic bags because they want to feel good about themselves. Why? The things you can actually do to help the environment are fly less, drive less, and eat less meat. Those are 3 of the main things you can do. But nobody wants to do those things. So instead, they talk about bags all day long because it makes them feel good about themselves. They don't want to make a sacrifice that would really help, so they talk about bags instead. I'm almost at the end now. This is a table that compares the impact of different materials, and we can see very clearly if we really wanted to make a difference, we would be focused on cement and iron and steel and the materials that actually generate far more waste and far more greenhouse gas and fossil fuel used. In fact, if you look at and some people will wonder, why are we being attacked all the time? Where is the funding coming from? Where does the money come from? There's a couple of billionaires in Australia, the Foresters, I think their name is, and they're from the iron and steel industry. And they took their money and they founded an organization called Minderoo. And Minderoo published reports saying how bad plastic is. So 2 billionaires from the iron and steel industry have formed an organization that criticizes plastic. No surprise, right? Why are they doing that? Because they're the ones who are actually harming the environment, and it's much easier for them to distract everyone by talking about plastics. I don't know if that's their real motive, but it certainly looks suspicious. So this is the problem. We will not have a good future if we lie to our children at school, if we tell our politicians nonsense, if the customers believe nonsense. We'll spend all day talking about plastics, and we've seen today the plastics industry is already doing more than any other industry to be green, to be circular, to recycle, to handle the waste. We're doing it all, and we should feel good about ourselves because our material has the lowest footprint, lowest cost, most versatile, and we're recycling it already and managing it responsibly. We need to stop talking as much about plastic and make sure the public knows what the real problems are, because people are going to be sad that they spend all their time focusing on plastic and replacing plastic only to find out they wasted their money and increased harm instead of reducing it. So I'd like to thank you all for your attention and open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris DeArmitt. E para realizar a entrega da placa de agradecimento, eu convido...
And to offer the plate, the thankful plate, I invite to the stage Rogério Mani, President of ABF.